triggering glacial lake outbursts, floods in our northern areas, home to the largest number of glaciers outside the polar region. The current cycle of super flooding we see today then is part of these extreme weather patterns. Unprecedented levels of cloudbursts, torrential and uninterrupted rain have caused widespread devastation, triggering both urban flooding, river floods, hill torrents, landslides, resulting in the loss of human lives, livelihoods, livelihoods and livestock, and severe damage to property and infrastructure. Southern, central, and northern Pakistan have been the worst affected, particularly Balochistan and Sindh. It is feared that the scale will exceed that of the 2010 mega floods or super floods. Nature is sending us all a new message, and because of its geographical location and a confluence of other vectors, Pakistan has become the ground zero of this century's biggest existential threat, global warming. In some areas, the water is just everywhere, in an unbroken horizon of inundation. 72 districts have been declared calamity hit. Over 33 million people have been affected, which is the size of a small country. More than 1,100, including women and children, have lost their lives, and many more are injured. Livelihoods are severely impacted with the loss of livestock, not to mention crop losses, among other crucial sources of sustenance. Hundreds of thousands of women, children and men have been displaced and forced to spend days and nights in camps and open areas under a merciless sky. Lack of access to food, clean water, shelter, and basic health care is making life harder for them with each passing day. Critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, and railway networks have been seriously damaged and destroyed. This is impeding our efforts for delivery of aid and transportation of affectees to safer locations. The situation is likely to deteriorate even further as heavy rains continue over areas already inundated by more than 2 months of storm and flooding. For us, this is no less than a national emergency. For the most vulnerable, especially the women and children impacted by this disaster, this is a life-defining experience. Excellencies, I've personally visited many of the flood-hit areas. Words cannot describe what it feels like to see people displaced from their own homes while mourning the loss of their loved ones. I've seen the pain, anguish, and suffering in their eyes, having literally lost everything they owned, now waiting for the next food pack, unsure about their futures. They are looking up to us for survival and to rebuild their lives and livelihoods. In addition to the human misery, these extraordinary floods have taken a severe toll on the economy and further stretched our limited resources. Excellencies, the government of Pakistan is cognizant of its responsibilities and has been leading the humanitarian response with invaluable support from the United Nations and humanitarian partners. As part of our national efforts, we've earmarked $173 million to help flood-affected people through direct cash transfers. This will be dispersed through the Benazir Income Support Program to 1.5 million families who will each receive 25,000 rupees in immediate cash relief. Rupees 5 billion has been allocated to the national disaster management authorities for relief efforts. The government is also providing 1 million rupees in compensation for next of kin of the deceased, 250,000 rupees for injury and for partial damage of houses, 500,000 rupees for destroyed houses. In addition to financial support, food packs, shelter items including tents and water, sanitation and hygiene supplies are also being provided by the national disaster management authorities and the provincial disaster management authorities. The government's efforts are being supported by the Pakistani nation, with people, civil society and humanitarian organizations stepping forward in a big way to complement the relief work with our characteristic generosity and philanthropic spirit. The Prime Minister's Relief Fund 2022 has also been established to facilitate people all over the country and to contribute to the flood relief efforts. Excellencies, but as it is evident, this disaster is colossal in its scale and devastation. It has severely strained, even overwhelmed, both our resources and our capacity. It has left millions vulnerable to health emergencies and a critical lack of basic survival needs. The gap between such needs and the capacity to deliver with speed and scale is crucial at this point. It requires urgent cooperation and support from the international community. We are profoundly grateful for the initial round of spontaneous solidarity and support from so many of our friends and partners around the world. I would like to acknowledge and thank all our friends for the prompt financial support and relief assistance being provided by several countries as well as the United Nations, World Bank and Asian Development Bank. We are especially grateful to the United Nations resident coordinator and his team for the excellent support that has been extended to us since the onset of this calamity. We need to expand and scale up these efforts and response. For that, we are launching the UN Flash Appeal for Pakistan Flood Response Plan 2022 today. The appeal prioritizes focused interventions in areas of education, food security, agriculture, health, nutrition, protection, shelter, and non-food items, water, sanitation, and hygiene. We also need assistance with livelihoods and livestock support, as well as relief, machinery, and equipment. We urgently need shelter and tents and mosquito nets, if they can be arranged and transported. This appeal is expected to address only part of the overall requirements and will therefore complement the broader effort. I would like to urge the international community to give its full backing to the Flash Appeal to help the people of Pakistan most in need. I hope our partners would appreciate that given the urgent requirements of this catastrophe and the compounded burden on our economy, the humanitarian assistance being offered does not cut into the already committed development assistance. Beyond the immediate rescue and relief efforts, we would need support for rehabilitation and reconstruction of the flood-affected areas. I encourage you to contribute generously towards meeting the funding requirements of this response plan and going beyond. We believe that the efforts of the United Nations will be boosted by swift offers and announcements of support from your countries. Excellencies, the calamity we are facing is a clear manifestation of the direct and unmitigated consequences of climate change. As one of the smallest emitters on the planet, less than 1% of greenhouse gases. In fact, Pakistan is in the front line of the devastation caused by global warming. This mega flood has once again made us acutely aware of our vulnerability to recurring climate shocks. Such episodes are becoming all too frequent and increasingly more devastating. I hope you will agree that both the spirit of climate justice as well as humanitarian assistance, the international community needs to step up and share the burden with those most affected and impacted by rapidly changing climate and weather patterns. Your full support and solidarity with the people of Pakistan at this time would go a long way to alleviating their suffering and in helping to rebuild their lives, resilience, and communities. I thank you and look forward to working with all of you to build back better.
वज़ीर ख़ारजा बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी उन्होंने आलमी बरादरी से अपील की कि इस वक्त पाकिस्तान को एक नेशनल इमरजेंसी का सामना है। उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि हम शुक्रगुजार हैं आलमी बरादरी के जिस
of the Relief Coordination Committee established by the Prime Minister of Pakistan in the wake of the recent devastating floods. Over to you, sir.
Honorable Foreign Minister, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Chairman NDMA, distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank on my own behalf and on behalf of the people of Pakistan, the international community and the development partners for the concern and support they have always extended and for their involvement in assisting Pakistan during present times of need. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, Pakistan is currently facing the horrors of climate change with unprecedented, devastating flash floods and hill torrents, which have washed away roads, homes, and crops and communities, leaving a trail of deadly havoc across Pakistan. The damage is of unimaginable proportions. More than 1,100 people have died since the monsoon season began in June this year. Literally 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater, which has exceeded every boundary, every norm we have seen in the past. Initial estimates suggest that more than 33 million people have been affected by the historic flooding. Heavy waters in the country have swept away bridges and roads, schools and hospitals, railway tracks, critical telecommunication infrastructure, cutting off communities. Thousands of people living in the mountainous areas have been evacuated, but authorities are still struggling to reach those who are trapped. Those who managed to escape have been crowded into one of the many makeshift camps across the country. Almost half of the country's cotton crop has been washed away, and vegetable, fruit, and rice fields have sustained significant damage, posing serious challenges to the food security. There is growing concern about the looming cost of building back from this disaster, as the preliminary estimates are higher than $10 billion. The government is looking forward for assistance from aid agencies, friendly countries, and international donors. Ladies and gentlemen, the Government of Pakistan's strategy for tackling the flood-affected areas is three-pronged: rescue and relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. The UN, due to its vast experience in emergency response, is leading the relief phase in consultation with NDMA and provincial governments. UN Humanitarian Coordinator has initiated the process of triggering a UN flash appeal, which we believe will go a long way in accelerating our effort to take care of the relief phase in shortest possible time. We are very grateful to the UN resident country coordinator who has extensively traveled through these areas and has extended full support in making this flash appeal possible in shortest time. For the rehabilitation and reconstruction phase, the World Bank is preparing to undertake a World Bank and Asian Development Bank are preparing to undertake a damage needs assessment study. This is a time-consuming exercise, and the results shall be shared with the donor community in due course of time. As said earlier, the magnitude of the crisis is increasing with the passage of time. Accordingly, the Government of Pakistan would like to seek the support from the donor community, both for the ongoing relief efforts and for the rebuilding process. Pakistan looks forward to a positive and visible response from the international community in this regard. And may I also say that Pakistan has also initiated an initiative for building a resilient infrastructure to face the challenges of climate change at UN level platform. And we do hope that international community will realize that this is, as the Secretary General said, that this is Pakistan today, It can be any other country tomorrow. We all have to join hands in order to fight the effects of climate change and make world a safer place for everyone living on this planet. Thank you very much.
I thank you, sir. I now invite the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in Pakistan, Mr. Julian Harnais, to please share his views with us.
Thank you. Foreign Minister, Minister Planning, Madam Minister, Chairman NDMA, Ministers, Chief Minister, Ambassadors, friends. Like many of you, Foreign Minister, Chief Minister of Sindh, Chairman, I spent the last week in the districts of Pakistan, Balochistan and Sindh. The scale of the catastrophe is beyond my comprehension. We were going through kilometre after kilometre through central Sindh, where all you could see was villages on the move. I literally saw tens of thousands of people just packing up what little they have, throwing it into trucks or just parking it by the side of the road, and trying to find a dry place to put their village. Piles of charpoys, mattresses in the rain. Thousands of people, parents, children, just looking around and going, what happens now? How am I going to protect my child from getting sick? What am I going to eat? Where am I find water? Where will I sleep tonight? And this all across Sindh and much of Balochistan. And their hands were stretched out, asking for help, our help, your help. Now's our time. This is all the result of climate change. Now, climate change is a polite way of saying the unwanted consequence of the industrialization of our planet. This is an internationally driven problem, and therefore it is only right that part of the solution comes from us. I also saw good things. I saw the government out there. I saw deputy commissioners pulling together their people across the country. Ministers out in their constituencies doing everything they could to bring together their people. The first distributions of bits, people receiving their little messages saying that come in for the assistance. These are all good things. Most touchingly of all was the generosity of the people of Pakistan at all levels. Be it rich, poor, they were all reaching into their pocket, giving out to those of their fellow citizens who needed most, and we need to do the same. So now's the time for the international community to step up next to the people of Pakistan. Climate change-driven catastrophe demands international solidarity. The United Agencies funds and programs, well, we started responding, so have the non-governmental organizations, both national and international, but we are limited by the financial resources available to us. This flash appeal will help to correct that. The flash appeal will build upon solid foundations. Since the last superfloods of 2010, which were not of the scale of this one, the government, with your support, has built strong foundations. The Benazir Income Support Programme, at a press of a button, can distribute money to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. That didn't exist back then. We've strengthened National Disaster Management Aid Authority and the PDMAs and the DDMAs across the country. There's a network of humanitarian response facilities that can be used to build a strong response. That didn't exist in 2010. So we're building upon strong foundations. Our international humanitarian appeal for the United Nations and non-governmental organizations will build upon that strong foundation. We will contribute to the work of the government, and our assistance will be under the guidance and the cooperation of the National Disaster Management Authority and the Provincial Disaster Management Authorities. I'm very grateful to the assistance of member states and even private citizens in developed countries who've given for this response. Thank you. I'm asking you to do more because it's the right thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harnais. I now request the Chairman of the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, Lieutenant General Akhtar Nawaz, to give us an overview of the flood situation in the country. Please, sir.
Honorable Foreign Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. The presentation that I'm going to make is based on a PowerPoint. It's more technical in nature to make you understand the impact, the losses, and what are, the needs. I would draw your attention to the very first page of the presentation, which actually sets next. Stay on to previous one. Yeah, which actually talks about the climate change and ultimately it's